There's a force in human life so powerful that it can drive people to risk everything: reputation, safety, even their future. Yet most people misunderstand it completely. Throughout history, many of the world's greatest achievers seem to harness this same energy and transform it into creativity, ambition, and remarkable accomplishment. The question is fascinating. What if the very impulse that often distracts us is actually the raw fuel of genius, if only we knew how to redirect it? There is a force in human life that is rarely spoken about with clarity. Most people experience it, struggle with it, sometimes feel controlled by it. Yet very few ever learn what it can truly become. That force is sexual desire. Not just the physical impulse people usually think of, but the deeper emotional energy behind it. And according to the philosophy you just heard hinted at, this energy may be the most powerful motivating force inside the human mind. Think about that for a moment. Across history, people have fought wars, taken enormous risks, written poetry, created art, built fortunes, and changed the course of their lives under the influence of this emotion. It has the ability to stir imagination, awaken courage, ignite determination, and push someone to act with a level of intensity they never show at any other time. When sexual desire enters the mind, something interesting happens. The mind becomes energized. Thoughts become vivid. The imagination becomes sharper. A person who might normally feel tired, hesitant, or uncertain suddenly feels driven, alive, almost unstoppable. You can see it everywhere if you start paying attention. A person trying to impress someone they admire suddenly becomes more creative, more confident, more ambitious. They work harder, dress better, speak more boldly. The energy behind the desire begins spilling into every area of life. Now here is the part most people never realize. This powerful emotional energy does not have to remain tied only to physical expression. It can be redirected, shifted, transformed. That transformation is what the original philosophy calls sex transmutation. The word transmute simply means to change one form of energy into another. Just like electricity can become light or heat, human emotion can also change form. Sex transmutation, then, is the process of taking the raw energy of sexual desire and directing it towards something else: creative, work, invention, leadership, business, art, writing, building, achievement. In other words, the energy that might normally push someone toward physical satisfaction can instead push them toward creation. And when that shift happens, something extraordinary can occur. The same desire that once demanded expression in one form suddenly fuels imagination, persistence, and ambition. The mind becomes more alert. Ideas begin to appear. The individual starts producing work-building plans, solving problems, pursuing goals. In this state, the person often feels unusually inspired, not because the sexual energy disappeared, but because it changed direction. And that different direction is everything. You see, sexual desire is not something that can simply be erased or eliminated. It is an inborn part of human nature. Trying to suppress it entirely is like trying to hold back the wind with your hands. For a while, you might manage to push it down, but eventually it returns, sometimes stronger than before. The original philosophy compares this force to a river. Imagine a powerful river flowing down a mountainside. If you build a dam across it, the water may stop temporarily. The surface becomes still. Everything looks calm, but beneath the surface, pressure builds. Water keeps gathering. The river keeps pushing. Eventually, one of two things happens. Either the dam releases the water in a controlled direction, or the pressure breaks through the barrier and the river rushes forward wherever it pleases. Sexual energy behaves in much the same way. You can suppress it for a while. You can ignore it, pretend it does not exist. But the energy itself does not disappear. It waits. And sooner or later, it demands an outlet. If the mind does not deliberately guide that outlet into productive channels, the energy will simply flow into the easiest available path, often purely physical expression. That is why suppression alone rarely works. The river will always find its way. The real question is not how to stop the current, but where to guide it. This is the heart of transmutation. Instead of allowing sexual desire to scatter attention, drain energy, or dominate the mind, a person can redirect that force into effort, creativity, ambition, and work. And when this happens, the emotional intensity that normally surrounds attraction becomes fuel for achievement. Think about the qualities that appear when someone is strongly driven by desire. Their imagination becomes vivid. Their courage increases. They take risks they might normally avoid. They become persistent. They keep going even when obstacles appear. They want to impress, to prove themselves, to create something meaningful. All of these qualities are exactly the same traits found in people who accomplish remarkable things. Inventors, artists, leaders, entrepreneurs, writers, visionaries. The difference is that these individuals learned consciously or unconsciously how to channel the emotional energy behind desire into their work. Instead of allowing the energy to burn out quickly through distraction, they stretched it across time. They let it power effort, concentration, and creativity. And the results could appear almost miraculous. An ordinary person once energized by this redirected force may suddenly begin producing ideas and results far beyond their previous level of ability. This is why the philosophy claims that the transmutation of sexual energy can transform mediocrity into genius, not because the person suddenly becomes someone else, but because a powerful internal engine has been turned toward creation. When sexual energy is redirected into the mind, it amplifies imagination. Ideas come faster. Connections appear between thoughts that previously seemed unrelated. Problems that once felt confusing begin to reveal solutions. The mind becomes restless with possibility. And alongside imagination comes courage. The same force that pushes someone to pursue romantic attraction can also push them to pursue big goals. It removes hesitation. It encourages boldness. It makes action feel urgent. Then comes persistence. Anyone who has experienced strong desire understands this instinctively. When the emotion is strong enough, a person keeps trying. They do not give up easily. They return again and again until they succeed. Now imagine applying that same persistence not toward temporary satisfaction, but toward building something meaningful in the world. A book, a business, an invention, a movement, an idea. That is the difference transmutation creates. The energy remains powerful, but the target changes. Instead of flowing into a brief moment of physical expression, the energy flows into sustained creation. This is why some of the most productive and influential individuals in history were known to possess strong emotional and sexual natures. Their intensity did not weaken them. In many cases, it strengthened them, but only because the energy found productive outlets. Without direction, the same force can easily lead to distraction, impulsive decisions, wasted time, and scattered effort. With direction, however, the force becomes one of the greatest engines of creativity available to the human mind. And the process of redirecting it does not require eliminating desire. In fact, the philosophy makes it clear that eliminating the desire would remove the very source of the power. The goal is not suppression. The goal is transformation, to take a powerful emotion and give it a larger purpose. The person who learns to do this gradually begins to notice something interesting. Their thoughts become more focused. Their imagination becomes more productive. Their motivation feels deeper and more consistent. Instead of being pushed around by impulses, they begin directing those impulses. And slowly, the energy that once scattered attention becomes the force that builds concentration. A person in this state may feel unusually alive. Their mind hums with ideas. Their goals feel exciting rather than exhausting. Work begins to feel like an outlet rather than an obligation. This does not mean the process is effortless. Redirecting emotional energy requires awareness and willpower. The individual must consciously choose where the energy flows. They must recognize the moment when desire appears and guide the resulting enthusiasm into productive channels. But the reward for doing so can be enormous, because when sexual energy fuels ambition rather than distraction, the person gains access to a level of motivation many people rarely experience. Instead of pushing themselves forward through discipline alone, they are pulled forward by emotional energy. And emotional energy is far stronger than simple effort. That is why the philosophy describes sex desire as the most powerful of all human drives. not because it is dangerous, not because it is shameful, but because it is potent, raw energy. And like all forms of energy, its impact depends on how it is used. Left unguided, it can lead to wasted time and scattered focus. Guided intentionally, it can become a creative force capable of producing remarkable results. The river will always flow. The real question is where you direct it. Because when that current is channeled toward imagination, ambition, and meaningful work, it can carry a person far beyond what ordinary effort alone could ever achieve. When you begin studying the lives of people who achieved extraordinary things, something curious starts appearing again and again. It shows up quietly in biographies, letters, personal stories, and historical accounts. At first, it seems like coincidence, but the more examples you see, the harder it becomes to ignore. Many of the men and women who reshaped industries, wrote timeless works of art, led nations, or built enormous fortunes shared a certain intensity in their emotional nature. They were not passive people. They were not lukewarm personalities drifting through life. Instead, they carried a powerful emotional current inside them, and that current often expressed itself through a strong sexual nature and deep romantic attachments. Now, that statement is easy to misunderstand. It does not mean that sexual passion alone produces greatness. History proves that clearly enough. Plenty of people possess strong desires without accomplishing anything extraordinary. The difference lies not in the existence of the emotion, but in what is done with it. What the historical observation suggests is something more subtle. Many high achievers seem to have possessed a strong emotional drive connected to love, attraction, admiration, or romantic influence. That emotional intensity often became the spark that awakened creativity, courage, ambition, and persistence. When properly directed, it fueled their achievements rather than distracting from them. When researchers began tracing the lives of notable figures across centuries, writers, inventors, statesmen, artists, builders, financiers, they discovered a pattern. Behind many of these individuals, there was often a woman whose presence, encouragement, admiration, or inspiration played a significant role in the unfolding of their achievements. Sometimes that woman was a wife, sometimes a partner, sometimes a muse, sometimes simply someone whose presence awakened the man's desire to rise higher, do better, become more than he had been before. The pattern was striking enough that it appeared repeatedly in biographies stretching back hundreds of years. This observation did not suggest that the woman herself necessarily directed the achievement. Instead, her influence stimulated the emotional energy that awakened the man's creative powers. Her presence stirred the imagination, intensified ambition, and gave direction to the powerful forces of desire that already existed within him. In many cases, the man may not even have realized the process was happening. He simply found himself thinking more clearly, working harder, dreaming bigger, and pushing beyond limits he once accepted. It is a familiar human experience. When someone deeply admires another person, when they feel attraction, respect, or romantic interest, the mind begins to change. Energy increases. Confidence rises. The desire to improve appears almost automatically. A man who might otherwise accept mediocrity suddenly feels compelled to accomplish something worthy of admiration. He wants to prove himself capable. He wants to build something meaningful. He wants to demonstrate strength, creativity, and achievement. That desire becomes fuel. Not the quiet fuel of routine effort, but the powerful fuel of emotion. Emotion is what moves human beings. Reason alone rarely drives extraordinary effort. But emotion, especially the emotion connected to love or attraction, can transform a person's entire outlook on life. When that emotional force enters the mind, imagination awakens, goals expand, possibilities seem larger than before. The person begins to see opportunities where previously they saw limitations, and suddenly the same individual who once moved cautiously through life begins acting with boldness. This is one of the central insights behind the idea that sexual emotion creates a powerful drive for action. It is not merely about attraction, it is about energy. Sexual emotion energizes the mind and body simultaneously. It raises enthusiasm. It sharpens awareness. It encourages risk-taking and persistence. These qualities are the same qualities required for creative achievement. Consider how many works of art, literature, music, and invention were born out of emotional intensity, connected to love or romantic longing. Poets have written their greatest verses while thinking of someone who stirred their heart. Composers have created music that still moves listeners centuries later, inspired by admiration, heartbreak, devotion, or longing. Inventors and builders have worked tirelessly through the night, driven partly by the desire to prove themselves worthy of someone's admiration. The energy behind the emotion does not remain contained in one area of life. It spreads outward. It spills into work, ambition, creativity, and achievement. When directed properly, it becomes one of the most powerful motivational forces available to human beings. That is why the historical observation about high achievers and romantic influence is so fascinating. It suggests that emotional intensity, especially when connected to love or attraction, can awaken creative power in ways that ordinary motivation cannot. Imagine a man before such an influence enters his life. He may be intelligent, capable, perhaps even talented, but without emotional stimulation, his ambition may remain dormant. His imagination may remain quiet. His goals may remain modest. Then someone enters his life whose presence awakens admiration. Suddenly, he begins to think differently. He wants to grow. He wants to achieve. He wants to become a person worthy of that admiration. The emotional spark ignites ambition. This does not mean the achievement happens solely because of the other person. The creative ability already existed within the individual. The ambition already existed in potential form. But emotional stimulation acts like a catalyst. It accelerates the reaction. It awakens the dormant powers of imagination, courage, and determination. Throughout history, this pattern has appeared in many different forms. Sometimes the inspiration came through deep romantic love. Sometimes through admiration for a partner. Sometimes through the simple desire to succeed in the eyes of someone whose opinion mattered greatly. Human beings are social creatures. We are deeply influenced by the presence of others. And among all the emotional influences that can affect us, love and romantic attraction stand among the strongest. These emotions penetrate deeper than logic. They shape the way people see themselves. They change what they believe is possible. A person who feels admired often behaves differently than someone who feels unnoticed. Confidence grows. Effort increases. The mind becomes more creative because it is emotionally engaged. Now consider how this connects to the idea of sexual emotion as a motivating force. Sexual energy carries with it a powerful biological drive. It urges people toward connection, expression, attraction, and recognition. But when that energy is redirected toward creative or ambitious pursuits, it becomes something more. Instead of seeking immediate satisfaction, the individual channels the emotional intensity into building something larger. The desire to impress, to attract admiration, to be worthy of affection. These impulses push the individual to expand beyond previous limits. In that way, romantic inspiration becomes a source of productivity rather than distraction. The same emotional current that might lead someone toward impulsive behavior can instead lead them toward extraordinary effort. The key difference lies in direction. When emotional energy flows only toward immediate gratification, its effect tends to be temporary. But when that energy is directed toward goals, work, creativity, and achievement, its effect can last for years. It becomes a sustained motivational force. That is why some of history's most productive individuals seem to thrive when inspired by romantic influence. The presence of someone they admired created a continuous emotional stimulus. Every effort, every idea, every achievement became part of a larger story in which they sought to prove themselves capable. In many cases, the woman who inspired this drive may not have consciously directed the process. She may simply have existed as the person whose admiration mattered most. Her presence became the mirror in which the man measured his potential. He wanted to become someone worthy of that reflection, and that desire pushed him forward. This is not limited to men alone, of course. Human emotion works in both directions. Love, admiration, and attraction can stimulate ambition and creativity in anyone. But the historical analysis referenced in the original philosophy focused particularly on male achievement, because many historical records documented men whose accomplishments were closely linked to the emotional influence of women in their lives. The broader principle, however, applies universally. Emotional energy connected to love, attraction, or admiration can stimulate the mind to operate at a higher level. It can sharpen imagination, strengthen courage, increase persistence, expand ambition, and most importantly, it can create a powerful desire to act. Action is the bridge between potential and achievement. Many people possess ability but lack the emotional drive to use it fully. When strong emotion enters the picture, that changes. The mind becomes restless with possibility. The person begins to move. Ideas turn into plans. Plans turn into effort. Effort turns into results. In this way, romantic inspiration often serves as the ignition switch for creative achievement. It awakens the individual's hidden powers. It gives meaning to effort. It provides a reason to pursue excellence. Without emotional engagement, ambition can fade. With emotional engagement, ambition becomes relentless. That is why the influence of love and sexual emotion has appeared repeatedly in the stories of those who achieved extraordinary things. It did not create their talents, but it activated them. It gave direction to their energy. And once that energy found a productive outlet, their achievements often expanded far beyond what seemed possible before. In the end, the lesson hidden within this observation is simple but profound. Sexual emotion is not merely a biological impulse. It is also a psychological force capable of stimulating imagination, courage, ambition, and persistence. When left unguided, it may lead to distraction. But when directed toward creation, it can become one of the most powerful engines of productivity the human mind possesses. And history quietly but consistently suggests that many of the world's most remarkable achievements were fueled in part by that very force. If you observe the human mind carefully, you begin to notice something remarkable. Most of the time, our thinking moves along at a fairly ordinary pace. We solve small problems, carry out routines, respond to daily responsibilities. Our thoughts are practical, grounded, and often limited by the immediate circumstances around us. But every once in a while, something different happens. Suddenly, the mind feels sharper. Ideas begin appearing faster than usual. Creativity awakens. Energy surges through our thoughts. The imagination starts connecting possibilities that once seemed distant or unrelated. In those moments, the mind feels almost elevated, like it has shifted into a higher gear. The original philosophy describes this shift as a change in the vibration of thought. Not vibration in a literal mechanical sense, but as a way of describing the intensity and activity of the mind. When the mind is stimulated strongly enough, it begins operating at a higher level of creative activity. And that change does not happen randomly. It happens because something stimulates the mind. A powerful emotion, a deep desire, a dramatic experience, an inspiring influence. Something triggers the brain to move beyond ordinary thinking and enter a heightened state of imagination and motivation. According to the philosophy we're exploring, there are certain influences that consistently produce this effect. These influences act as mental stimulants, forces that increase the intensity of thought and awaken the creative imagination. Over time, careful observation revealed that the human mind responds especially strongly to a specific group of stimuli. Some of these influences are constructive and life-enhancing. Others can be destructive if misused. Yet all of them share one common trait. They increase the activity of the mind. They push thought beyond its normal boundaries. And when they do, they unlock levels of imagination and energy that may otherwise remain dormant. Among the most powerful of these mental stimulants is the desire for sexual expression. The philosophy places this stimulus at the very top of the list, describing it as the most intense and compelling of all human emotions. When this desire awakens in the mind, it tends to elevate imagination, increase courage, and intensify determination. Anyone who has experienced strong attraction understands this instinctively. When the emotion is present, the mind becomes alert. Ideas appear. Confidence rises. The individual suddenly feels capable of effort and persistence that might otherwise seem exhausting. This emotional charge does not stay confined to one area of life. It spills outward, influencing behavior, creativity, and ambition. That is why sexual desire is considered the strongest stimulus capable of activating the creative imagination. But it is not the only one. Another powerful stimulus is love. Love operates differently from raw sexual desire, yet it produces a similar elevation in mental activity. When someone experiences genuine love, the mind often becomes more imaginative, more compassionate, and more visionary. Love encourages people to build, create, and contribute. It inspires poetry, music, invention, sacrifice, and dedication. It gives emotional depth to human effort. Unlike fleeting attraction, love tends to produce a sustained emotional environment in which creativity can flourish over long periods of time. Where sexual desire ignites energy, love stabilizes and directs it. Then there is the stimulus of ambition, especially the burning desire for power, recognition, or financial success. This form of stimulation has driven countless individuals throughout history to pursue achievements that once seemed impossible. The hunger to succeed can awaken extraordinary persistence. It can cause someone to work long hours, take risks, and overcome obstacles that might discourage others. Ambition stimulates the mind by creating urgency. It pushes the individual to imagine possibilities that lie beyond current circumstances. When ambition becomes intense enough, the mind begins searching constantly for solutions, opportunities, and new paths forward. The next stimulus might seem more subtle, but its influence on the mind is profound. Music. Music has the remarkable ability to alter emotional states almost instantly. A single melody can awaken memories, stir emotion, and energize imagination. Throughout history, music has accompanied creativity and innovation. Artists, writers, and thinkers often find their minds becoming more fluid and expressive when music fills the background. Music seems to bypass ordinary logic and communicate directly with the emotional centers of the mind. In doing so, it creates a mental atmosphere in which imagination can expand. Another stimulus that strongly influences the mind is friendship. Human beings are social creatures. The presence of trusted companions can encourage optimism, confidence, and enthusiasm. When people share ideas with friends who understand and support them, their thoughts often become more expansive. Possibilities multiply because the mind feels safe exploring them. A friendly environment stimulates the mind by reducing fear and encouraging expression. Closely related to friendship is another powerful stimulus, known as the mastermind alliance. This concept refers to the harmonious cooperation of two or more people who combine their knowledge, energy, and imagination in pursuit of a shared goal. When individuals collaborate with mutual respect and common purpose, something fascinating happens. Their combined thinking often produces ideas that none of them could have created alone. It is as if the collective energy of multiple minds stimulates a higher level of thought. Many great achievements have emerged from such partnerships, where individuals supported one another, exchanged ideas, and expanded the limits of their thinking together. But not all mind stimuli come from positive experiences. Sometimes suffering becomes a powerful stimulant. Shared hardship, persecution, or adversity can intensify emotional energy and push people to search for solutions or new paths forward. History offers countless examples of individuals who transformed personal suffering into creative expression, leadership, or innovation. When people experience hardship, the emotional impact can elevate their thinking in unexpected ways. The desire to overcome difficulty becomes a driving force that sharpens the mind and strengthens determination. Another important stimulus is autosuggestion. This refers to the deliberate influence individuals exert over their own thoughts through repetition, affirmation, and focused intention. By consciously directing their thoughts toward a specific goal, people can stimulate the subconscious mind and encourage it to search for solutions. Autosuggestion works because the mind responds strongly to repeated emotional ideas. When someone continuously feeds the mind with images of success, achievement, or possibility, those ideas begin shaping behavior and perception. The mind becomes stimulated by its own internally generated influence. Now we arrive at a stimulus that is less constructive, but undeniably powerful. Fear. Fear can activate the mind with intense urgency. When danger appears, the brain becomes alert, scanning for solutions and strategies. In moments of fear, thoughts accelerate. The mind attempts to analyze threats, evaluate options, and respond quickly. However, unlike the positive stimuli we discussed earlier, fear tends to narrow thinking rather than expand it. It may energize the mind temporarily, but it often produces anxiety, hesitation, and distorted judgment. Fear stimulates the mind, but rarely in a way that supports creativity or constructive achievement. Finally, there are artificial stimulant substances such as alcohol or narcotics. These substances can temporarily alter mental states, sometimes creating the illusion of heightened creativity or emotional freedom. Certain writers and artists throughout history experimented with such substances in the belief that they could stimulate imagination. While these substances may produce short-term mental shifts, they often come at a heavy cost. Over time, they weaken clarity, damage health, and reduce the individual's ability to maintain sustained creative effort. That is why the philosophy distinguishes between natural constructive stimuli and destructive ones. Most of the influences we discussed, sexual desire, love, ambition, music, friendship, collaboration, and even adversity, are natural forces embedded in human experience. When understood and directed properly, they stimulate the mind in ways that encourage creativity, imagination, and achievement. Others' fear and artificial substances can also stimulate the mind, but often lead to confusion, instability, or destructive outcomes. The key insight is not that stimulation itself is good or bad. The key insight is that the human mind responds powerfully to emotional intensity. Whenever emotions become strong enough, the mind shifts into a higher level of activity. Ideas accelerate, imagination awakens, energy appears. The real question becomes this: which stimulus will dominate the mind? If the mind is stimulated by fear, the resulting thoughts may revolve around danger and limitation. If it is stimulated by ambition, the mind begins searching for opportunities. If stimulated by love, it becomes compassionate and creative. And if stimulated by sexual desire, especially when that energy is redirected toward constructive goals, the imagination may ignite with unusual intensity. This is why sexual desire stands at the top of the list. It combines physical energy with emotional intensity in a way that few other stimuli can match. When present, it energizes the entire system, mind and body together. It encourages boldness, creativity, and action. When properly directed, it can stimulate the creative imagination to extraordinary levels. But like every powerful force, its outcome depends on how it is used. Left unguided, it may lead to distraction. Guided with awareness, it becomes fuel for invention, art, leadership, and achievement. And when combined with the other positive stimuli, love, ambition, friendship, collaboration, the result can be remarkable. The mind becomes energized, imaginative, and determined. Ideas appear that might otherwise remain hidden. Plans take shape. Action follows. What once seemed like ordinary thinking transforms into creative thought capable of shaping the world. In this way, understanding mental stimulation becomes one of the keys to unlocking human potential. Because once you recognize what truly energizes the mind, you can begin guiding those forces deliberately. Instead of waiting for inspiration to arrive by chance, you learn how to cultivate the emotional conditions that awaken it. And among all those conditions, one stands above the rest in intensity and driving force. The powerful emotional current of sexual desire, when understood, respected, and redirected, becomes one of the most potent stimulants of the creative imagination the human mind can experience. There is a moment that almost everyone has experienced at least once in life. You're thinking about a problem, maybe even struggling with it. You analyze it from every logical angle you can think of. You try different approaches. Nothing quite works. Eventually, you stop trying. Maybe you take a walk. Maybe you go to sleep. Maybe you simply let your mind drift somewhere else. And then, unexpectedly, the answer appears. It flashes into your mind so suddenly that it almost feels as if it came from somewhere outside of you. One moment there is confusion, and the next moment there is clarity. The solution feels obvious, even elegant. You wonder how you didn't see it before. Most people simply call this a hunch. Others describe it as intuition. But within the philosophy we're exploring, this phenomenon has a more specific name. It is connected to what is called the creative imagination, and the mysterious faculty often referred to as the sixth sense. To understand this idea, we first need to look at the difference between two kinds of thinking that exist within the human mind. The first is the type of thinking most of us use every day: logical reasoning, analytical thought, step-by-step problem solving. This is the conscious mind at work. It organizes information, compares facts, and evaluates possibilities. But there is another process happening beneath the surface. Beneath conscious reasoning lies a deeper mental system that constantly stores experiences, impressions, emotions, and memories. This system is often called the subconscious mind. Unlike the conscious mind, the subconscious never truly rests. It continues processing information even when we are asleep. It forms connections between ideas that we may not consciously recognize. Sometimes, when these hidden processes reach a certain point of clarity, the subconscious sends a signal upward into conscious awareness. And that signal appears as a sudden idea, a flash of understanding, a creative insight, a hunch. The philosophy refers to the channel through which these insights arrive as the creative imagination. Now, the word imagination often gives people the wrong impression. Many assume imagination simply means fantasy or daydreaming. But in this context, creative imagination refers to something much more powerful. It is the mental faculty through which ideas appear that did not come directly from step-by-step reasoning. It is the gateway through which inspiration enters the mind. The creative imagination operates like a receiving instrument. When the mind is stimulated, especially by powerful emotions, it becomes more sensitive to ideas and impressions that lie beyond ordinary thought. These impressions can come from several possible sources. One source is the subconscious mind itself. Every experience, every observation, every idea we encounter throughout life leaves some trace within the subconscious. Over time, these impressions accumulate like pieces of a puzzle. The conscious mind may not know how they fit together, but the subconscious continues working with them. Then, at some unexpected moment, the pieces align, the solution emerges, and the conscious mind experiences it as a sudden flash of insight. But the philosophy suggests that the creative imagination may also receive influences from beyond our own personal experience. Ideas may arrive that seem entirely new ideas that cannot easily be traced to anything we previously studied or observed. Where do these ideas come from? That question has fascinated thinkers for centuries. Some believe such insights come from what they call infinite intelligence, a universal source of knowledge beyond individual minds. Others believe ideas can pass between human minds in subtle ways that science is only beginning to understand. Whatever the explanation may ultimately prove to be, history offers countless examples of individuals who relied heavily on intuitive insight while solving complex problems. Consider inventors. Thomas Edison spent years working on inventions that required solutions nobody had previously discovered. Logical experimentation played an important role in his work, but Edison also spoke often about moments when ideas appeared unexpectedly after long periods of concentration. After exhausting every obvious approach, he would sometimes step away from the problem. Later, seemingly out of nowhere, a new concept would appear, often the missing piece needed to complete the invention. Another example can be found in the work of Nikola Tesla, who described experiencing vivid mental images of machines and inventions before they were ever physically built. Tesla often claimed that entire devices would appear in his mind fully formed, allowing him to examine them mentally before constructing them in reality. These experiences illustrate something fascinating about the creative imagination. It often works best when the conscious mind stops forcing the solution. When we struggle intensely with a problem, the conscious mind sometimes blocks the deeper processes that could lead to insight. But when we relax, when the mind becomes calm and receptive, the creative imagination can begin transmitting ideas more clearly. This is why many people experience breakthroughs while walking, showering, resting, or even dreaming. The conscious mind steps aside. The subconscious continues working, and the creative imagination delivers the answer. Great leaders have also relied on this process. When Abraham Lincoln faced enormous decisions during times of crisis, he often withdrew into quiet reflection before making a final choice. He studied facts carefully, but he also trusted the deeper impressions that formed within his mind. Inventors, writers, musicians, and scientists across history have described similar experiences. They immerse themselves in a problem. They gather information. They analyze possibilities. Then they wait. And eventually the answer appears. The philosophy refers to the faculty responsible for these insights as the sixth sense. The sixth sense is not described as a supernatural power in the dramatic sense often portrayed in fiction. Instead, it represents the mind's ability to receive ideas that originate beyond ordinary reasoning. It is closely connected to the creative imagination and the subconscious mind. When the sixth sense becomes active, ideas arrive that feel different from normal thoughts. They often appear suddenly. They carry a sense of certainty. They seem complete the moment they arrive. The individual may not know exactly how the idea formed, but the solution feels convincing enough to act upon. In many cases, such insights become the starting point of remarkable achievements. Consider scientific discoveries. Chemist Friedrich Kekulé reportedly discovered the structure of the benzene molecule after dreaming of a snake forming a ring by biting its own tail. The dream revealed the circular structure that had puzzled chemists for years. Mathematician Henri Poincaré described sudden insights appearing while he stepped away from problems that had resisted long hours of logical work. Composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart spoke of musical ideas arriving fully formed in his mind before he wrote them down. These examples suggest something extraordinary about the human mind. Logic plays a vital role in solving problems. But many of humanity's greatest breakthroughs begin as intuitive insights that appear before logic fully explains them. This is where the creative imagination becomes essential. It acts as the bridge between the conscious mind and deeper sources of thought. The philosophy suggests that emotional stimulation plays a major role in activating this faculty. When the mind experiences powerful emotions such as love, ambition, enthusiasm, or sexual energy, the level of mental activity increases. Thoughts become more intense. Imagination becomes more receptive. In this heightened state, the creative imagination becomes especially sensitive to ideas. That is why moments of emotional intensity often coincide with bursts of creativity. Artists write their most powerful work when emotionally inspired. Inventors make breakthroughs when deeply driven by purpose. Leaders discover bold strategies when urgency awakens their imagination. The sixth sense becomes more active when the mind is energized, but it also requires another condition: receptivity. The mind must remain open enough to recognize intuitive impressions when they appear. Many people ignore these subtle signals. A hunch appears, but they dismiss it because it does not follow ordinary reasoning. Others pay attention. They write the idea down, they test it, they explore it. Over time, individuals who respect their intuitive impressions often find that those impressions become more frequent and more reliable. The creative imagination grows stronger with use. Just like a muscle that becomes stronger through exercise, this mental faculty develops through practice and trust. This explains why many highly creative individuals seem to rely heavily on intuition. They have trained themselves to listen to the subtle signals of the sixth sense. They combine logical reasoning with intuitive insight. Logic organizes ideas. Intuition discovers them. Together, these two processes form the foundation of creative achievement. When a person learns to balance both careful reasoning and receptive imagination, the mind becomes capable of remarkable things. New inventions emerge. Solutions appear for problems once considered impossible. Ideas spread across fields that previously seemed unrelated. And sometimes those ideas arrive in a single, unexpected moment. A flash of insight, a sudden clarity, a quiet voice inside the mind that says, "This is the answer." That moment is the creative imagination at work. It is the whisper of the sixth sense. And throughout history, it has guided some of humanity's greatest thinkers, inventors, and leaders toward discoveries that change the world. Ideas have a strange way of appearing when the mind is prepared for them. Not forced, not chased, but invited. Throughout history, some of the most creative thinkers discovered that breakthroughs often arrive only after a certain process takes place inside the mind. First comes intense focus, then patience, then almost paradoxically a kind of mental stillness. And somewhere within that quiet space, insight begins to emerge. The original philosophy offers several real-world examples of this process, and one of the most fascinating involves a scientist whose work rarely appears in everyday conversation today, yet whose influence quietly shaped many technological advances. His name was Dr. Elmer Gates. Dr. Gates was known for an unusual habit. Unlike many inventors who worked constantly with tools and machinery, he spent long periods doing something that looked almost like nothing at all. He would sit quietly in a room, often in near total darkness, concentrating deeply on a problem he was trying to solve. At first glance, this might have appeared unproductive, but to Gates this time was not idle. It was deliberate preparation for creativity. Inside his laboratory, he built what he called a personal communication room. The room was specially designed to remove distractions. It was nearly soundproof. All light could be shut out completely. The room contained little more than a small table, a pad of paper, and a button that controlled the lights. When Gates faced a problem he wanted to solve, he would enter this room and sit down at the table. Then he would turn off the lights and allow himself to become fully absorbed in thought. But he didn't begin by searching wildly for answers. Instead, he followed a deliberate mental process. First, he would gather every known fact related to the problem. He would think carefully about the parts of the challenge he already understood. He would visualize the elements that had already been solved. This stage was logical, analytical, grounded in reason. Then came the second stage. After filling his mind with the known elements of the problem, he would deliberately focus on the unknown parts, the missing piece, the unresolved question, the puzzle he couldn't yet answer. He would concentrate on that gap in understanding. But instead of trying to force the answer through sheer effort, he would then relax his conscious thinking. He would quiet his mind and wait. Sometimes nothing happened for a while, but other times something remarkable occurred. Ideas began appearing in rapid succession. According to accounts of his work, Gates sometimes experienced moments when insights arrived so quickly that he had to write continuously just to keep up with them. On one occasion, he reportedly wrote for nearly 3 hours, without pause, as ideas flowed into his mind. When he later examined the notes, he discovered something extraordinary. The ideas described principles and solutions that had not existed in any scientific literature available to him. They were original insights, solutions to problems that had previously remained unsolved. Through this unusual process, Dr. Gates produced more than 200 patents during his lifetime. His method looked simple on the surface. Sit in silence. Focus on a problem. Wait for ideas. But beneath that simplicity lay a powerful understanding of how the mind works. Gates understood that creativity involves two different mental processes working together. The first process is reasoning, the ability to gather facts, analyze information, and combine known ideas logically. The second process is creative imagination, the mental faculty through which entirely new ideas emerge. Reason alone cannot produce invention if the necessary knowledge does not already exist. But imagination alone cannot produce useful ideas without a foundation of facts. True creativity requires both. This same pattern appears in the work of another legendary figure, Thomas Edison. Edison is often remembered as the tireless inventor who worked endlessly in his laboratory, testing one idea after another. His reputation for persistence is well-deserved, but persistence alone does not explain his success. Edison understood something important about the relationship between effort and inspiration. When he worked on the electric light bulb, for example, he reportedly tested thousands of different materials in search of the right filament. Each experiment relied on logical reasoning and careful testing, but reasoning alone could not reveal which combination would finally succeed. At some point, imagination had to guide the search. Edison often alternated between intense experimentation and periods of reflection. After exhausting the possibilities that logic could suggest, he allowed his mind to remain open to new ideas. And eventually, the insight appeared. This balance between reasoning and creative imagination forms the core of the process described in the philosophy. First, gather information. Study the problem. Understand the known facts. Then stimulate the mind through emotion, desire, or deep interest so that it becomes fully engaged. After that, focus attention on the unanswered question. Hold the problem clearly in the mind. But then something surprising must happen. The conscious effort must relax. The mind must release its grip on the problem. Because when conscious reasoning steps aside, another part of the mind begins working more freely. The subconscious mind continues processing the information. It explores combinations that logic alone might overlook. It connects ideas from different experiences and memories. Eventually, when those connections become clear enough, the solution rises into conscious awareness. And when it does, it often feels instantaneous. A sudden insight, a flash of understanding, a quiet certainty that the answer has arrived. This process explains why many inventors and thinkers throughout history developed habits that might seem unusual at first glance. Some took long solitary walks. Others worked late at night when the world was quiet. Some sat in silent reflection, allowing their thoughts to wander freely. They were not wasting time. They were creating the conditions in which insight could appear. The key element in this process is mental stimulation. The mind must first become energized, often through strong desire or deep interest in the problem. When someone truly cares about solving a challenge, their emotional involvement increases the intensity of thought. Then comes concentration. The mind focuses on the problem long enough to understand it thoroughly. But concentration alone is not enough. The next step is relaxation. Once the conscious mind has done its work, it must allow the deeper creative faculties to operate. This is why moments of insight often arrive when we least expect them. In the shower, during a walk, just before falling asleep. At those moments, the conscious mind loosens its control and the subconscious mind gains the freedom to send ideas upward. The philosophy emphasizes that this process cannot be rushed. Creative imagination does not respond well to impatience. It responds to preparation. The mind must first be filled with knowledge related to the problem. Without that foundation, the subconscious has little material with which to work. But once the mind is prepared, patience becomes essential. Ideas arrive in their own time, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, and occasionally in overwhelming bursts, just as Dr. Gates experienced when he filled page after page with ideas that appeared almost faster than he could record them. This pattern appears repeatedly in the stories of inventors, scientists, artists, and leaders. They study deeply, they focus intensely, they relax their conscious effort, and eventually the answer appears, not because the mind stopped working, but because it began working in a different way. This is the collaboration between reasoning and creative imagination. Reason prepares the problem. Imagination delivers the solution. And when both processes operate together, the results can be extraordinary. The story of Dr. Elmer Gates and the experiences of inventors like Edison remind us of something important. Human creativity is not simply a matter of intelligence. It is a process, a rhythm of focus and release, effort and patience, logic and intuition. When we learn to follow that rhythm, we begin to understand how great ideas are born. They rarely appear through force. They appear through preparation, stimulation, concentration, and quiet receptivity. In other words, we prepare the mind, focus the question, step aside for a moment, and allow insight to find us. There is a quality some people possess that is difficult to define, but impossible to ignore. You have probably encountered it before. Someone walks into a room and the atmosphere subtly changes. Conversations shift. Attention moves toward them without effort. They speak and people listen. They express an idea and suddenly others feel excited about it too. We often call this quality charisma. Sometimes we call it presence. In the original philosophy, however, it is described with a more specific term, personal magnetism. Personal magnetism is not simply charm or social skill. It is a form of emotional energy that radiates outward from a person and influences those around them. Some individuals seem to possess it naturally. Others develop it gradually. But according to the ideas we're exploring, one of the strongest sources of this magnetism is the same force we have been discussing throughout this chapter, sexual energy. Now, this does not mean that magnetism is about physical attraction alone. The idea goes deeper than that. Sexual energy is described as one of the most powerful emotional forces in the human system. When that energy is present and properly directed, it creates vitality, enthusiasm, and confidence. And these qualities are exactly what produce a magnetic personality. Think about the difference between someone who feels emotionally alive and someone who feels drained. One speaks with energy, moves with purpose, and expresses ideas with conviction. The other may speak the same words, yet the message falls flat. The difference lies not in vocabulary or intelligence, but in emotional intensity. Sexual energy, when channeled constructively, increases that intensity. It colors the voice. It shapes posture and movement. It strengthens confidence. It produces enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is one of the most contagious forces in human interaction. Consider the human voice for a moment. Two people can say the exact same sentence and produce entirely different reactions in their listeners. One voice sounds dull, uncertain, lifeless. The other voice carries warmth, rhythm, excitement. The difference is not only technique, it is emotional energy. When someone is energized internally, their voice reflects it automatically. Tone becomes richer. Words flow more smoothly. The listener senses conviction even before analyzing the meaning of the words themselves. The original philosophy suggests that sexual energy contributes to this effect because it heightens emotional vitality. It energizes the body and mind together, creating a kind of natural resonance in speech. People respond to that resonance instinctively. The same principle appears in posture and physical presence. Highly energized individuals tend to move differently. Their movements are quicker, more purposeful, more confident. Their posture communicates alertness and readiness rather than hesitation. This physical expression is not artificial performance. It emerges naturally from internal energy. When a person feels inspired, ambitious, or emotionally stimulated, the body reflects that state. Shoulders straighten, eyes become brighter, gestures become more expressive. Others notice these signals even if they cannot explain why. Confidence is another element closely tied to this form of magnetism. Sexual energy often increases confidence because it intensifies the desire to act, to express, to impress. When that energy is redirected toward constructive goals, it removes much of the hesitation that normally holds people back. Instead of worrying about how they appear, the energized individual focuses on what they want to accomplish. That shift alone transforms how others perceive them. Confidence attracts attention. Uncertainty repels it. But perhaps the most powerful element of personal magnetism is enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is not simply excitement. It is emotional commitment expressed through action and communication. When someone truly believes in an idea, their enthusiasm becomes visible in their words, their tone, their gestures, and their persistence. And enthusiasm spreads quickly from one mind to another. If you have ever listened to a speaker who genuinely believed in their message, you know how this works. At first, you may feel neutral. But as the speaker continues speaking with conviction, energy, and passion, you begin to feel the same excitement they feel. Your mind becomes engaged. Your curiosity awakens. The idea begins to feel important. This is the effect of emotional influence. The philosophy suggests that when sexual energy is channeled into enthusiasm, it amplifies this influence dramatically. Instead of remaining a private emotion, the energy becomes part of communication. It gives ideas force. It gives words momentum. This is why many successful leaders and persuaders seem to possess extraordinary presence. Their words carry emotional weight because their ideas are backed by powerful internal energy. Leadership itself depends heavily on this kind of influence. A leader must inspire others to believe in something larger than themselves. Facts alone rarely accomplish this task. People follow those who make them feel something: hope, confidence, excitement, determination. Personal magnetism allows leaders to transmit these emotions effectively. When leaders speak with genuine enthusiasm, others sense the authenticity behind the message. They feel the energy of conviction, and because emotions spread socially, that conviction begins influencing the group. This same principle plays a particularly important role in salesmanship. Selling is not merely the act of presenting information about a product or service. It is the act of transferring belief and enthusiasm from one person to another. A salesperson who lacks emotional engagement rarely persuades anyone. Even if the facts are correct, the message feels lifeless. But when the salesperson genuinely believes in what they are offering, something different happens. Their voice becomes animated, their explanation becomes vivid, their confidence reassures the listener, and their enthusiasm begins influencing the buyer's emotional state. According to the philosophy, many of the most successful salespeople possess strong personal magnetism because they unconsciously channel sexual energy into enthusiasm for their work. They may not think of it in those terms. They simply feel energized and confident when interacting with others. But the underlying source of that vitality often traces back to emotional energy, redirected into professional activity. When that energy flows into enthusiasm, the result is persuasive power. People tend to trust individuals who appear confident and emotionally invested. They feel drawn to those who communicate with warmth and vitality. This does not mean manipulation or artificial charm. True magnetism cannot be faked for long. It arises from genuine emotional engagement with one's purpose. If the energy is real, people sense it. If it is forced or artificial, the effect disappears quickly. This is why individuals who cultivate strong personal purpose often develop natural charisma over time. Their goals energize them, their enthusiasm grows, and their communication begins carrying emotional intensity. Others respond to that intensity instinctively. The fascinating part of this concept is that magnetism is not limited to a few rare personalities. The philosophy suggests it can be developed. When individuals learn to channel emotional energy into constructive pursuits, work, leadership, creativity, communication, their presence begins changing. They speak with more conviction. They move with more confidence. They engage others with more enthusiasm. Over time, these qualities combine into what appears to be natural charisma. But beneath the surface lies a simple principle. Emotional energy directed toward a meaningful goal produces enthusiasm. Enthusiasm produces influence. Influence creates leadership and persuasion. In that sense, sexual energy is not merely a biological impulse. It is a reservoir of vitality that can energize the entire personality. When scattered aimlessly, it may create distraction. But when guided into ambition, creativity, and communication, it becomes one of the most powerful sources of personal magnetism. People begin responding differently. Opportunities appear more frequently. Ideas gain attention more easily. And the individual gradually discovers that influence is not simply about authority or expertise. It is about emotional energy expressed through voice posture, confidence, and enthusiasm. In other words, the same force that drives attraction can also drive inspiration. And when it does, it transforms ordinary communication into something far more powerful, the ability to move minds, motivate action, and lead others toward shared purpose. If you look closely at the timeline of human achievement, you may begin to notice an interesting pattern. Many of the individuals who accomplished remarkable things, building great businesses, leading nations, producing influential works of art, or shaping industries, did not reach the height of their success in their early 20s or even their 30s. Instead, their most significant accomplishments often appeared later in life. Again and again, history reveals that many people seem to arrive at their greatest productivity somewhere around the age of 40, sometimes even later. At first, this observation might feel surprising. Youth is commonly associated with energy, ambition, and physical vitality. It might seem logical that the most impressive achievements would appear during those early decades when enthusiasm is high and responsibilities are fewer. Yet, when historians and researchers began examining the lives of highly successful individuals, they discovered something unexpected. The peak of creative and productive power often came after years of experience, maturity, and emotional development. Why would this be the case? The philosophy we are exploring offers an explanation that connects directly to the theme of sexual energy and its influence on human motivation. In early adulthood, sexual energy is usually expressed in its most direct and physical form. The biological impulse is powerful, and the individual often seeks immediate outlets for that desire. This is a natural part of human development. Young people are discovering relationships, attraction, and emotional intensity for the first time. Their attention is frequently pulled toward experiences that provide immediate satisfaction rather than long-term transformation. As a result, much of the powerful energy behind sexual desire tends to be released through purely physical expression. The energy flows outward quickly, the emotional force dissipates. And once the moment has passed, the motivating power of that energy fades until it builds again. This cycle is common in youth. The energy appears, seeks release, and disappears again. But something begins to change as individuals grow older. With time comes experience. With experience comes reflection. And gradually, many people begin realizing that the emotional energy behind desire can serve a larger purpose than temporary satisfaction. Instead of allowing that energy to be spent immediately, they begin redirecting it toward work, toward ambition, toward creativity, toward building something meaningful. This shift does not happen automatically for everyone, but for those who learn to guide their emotional energy into constructive pursuits, the results can be extraordinary. The same force that once demanded instant gratification begins fueling persistence and vision. Instead of being released quickly, the energy is sustained and channeled over long periods of effort. And this sustained effort often leads to remarkable achievements. That is why the philosophy suggests that many individuals reach their greatest success later in life. By that time, they have learned, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, how to transform emotional energy into productive power. They have gained control over impulses that once scattered their attention. They have developed patience, discipline, and direction. The energy that once flowed impulsively now flows with purpose. History provides many examples supporting this observation. One often cited figure is Andrew Carnegie, the industrialist, who built one of the largest steel empires in the world. Carnegie's early life involved years of learning, experimenting, and building connections. His most significant achievements and influence emerged after he had already gained maturity and experience. Another example is Henry Ford. Although Ford showed mechanical curiosity from a young age, the automobile revolution associated with his name did not fully emerge until he had spent many years refining ideas, overcoming failures, and developing the famous Model T production system. Thomas Edison offers another illustration. His inventive career spanned decades, and many of his most impactful contributions came after years of experimentation and accumulated knowledge. Even in politics, this pattern appears frequently. Abraham Lincoln did not become president until he was well into middle age, after decades of legal work, political experience, and personal reflection. The leadership he displayed during one of the most difficult periods in American history emerged from a mind shaped by years of learning and emotional maturity. These examples reveal something important. Achievement rarely comes from raw energy alone. It comes from energy combined with direction. Young individuals often possess enormous emotional intensity, but lack the experience needed to guide it effectively. As a result, their energy may be spent quickly in scattered pursuits. But as life progresses, many people begin learning how to focus that energy more deliberately. They discover goals that matter deeply to them. They develop patience. They learn to endure temporary discomfort in pursuit of long-term results. And in doing so, they begin channeling their emotional power toward creation rather than immediate release. The philosophy describes this transformation as a key turning point in human development. Before the age of 40, many individuals are still learning how to manage their desires. They experiment, make mistakes, and gradually understand their own motivations. After that point, those who learn from their experiences often gain a new kind of control. They understand their impulses better. They recognize the value of redirecting energy toward ambition and creativity, and with that understanding comes a new level of productivity. This does not mean that success cannot occur earlier in life. There are certainly examples of individuals who achieved remarkable things at young ages. But the broader historical pattern suggests that sustained greatness often appears later when emotional energy is combined with wisdom, discipline, and purpose. Another factor also contributes to this shift. As individuals grow older, they often become less interested in proving themselves through temporary experiences and more interested in building something lasting. Their focus expands beyond immediate pleasure. They begin thinking about legacy contribution and long-term impact. This change in perspective naturally redirects emotional energy toward creative and productive endeavors. Instead of asking, "What can I experience right now?" the question becomes, "What can I build? What can I accomplish?" That shift transforms the way energy flows through the mind. And once that transformation takes place, the individual often discovers a new level of determination. The same emotional force that once scattered attention now fuels concentration. The same desire that once demanded immediate satisfaction now supports patience and persistence. The individual becomes capable of sustained effort over years rather than moments. That is the type of effort required for great achievements. Building industries, writing influential books, leading nations, developing new technologies, these accomplishments rarely emerge overnight. They require long periods of focused work. They require emotional energy that can endure, and that endurance often develops through maturity. So when the philosophy observes that many people achieve their greatest success after 40, it is not making a rigid rule. Instead, it is pointing to a common pattern in human development. Youth brings passion and possibility. Experience brings direction. When those two forces finally merge, when powerful emotional energy is guided by wisdom and purpose, the result can be extraordinary. In that moment, the individual is no longer simply reacting to desire. They are directing it. And when desire becomes direction, it transforms from a fleeting impulse into a driving force capable of shaping a lifetime of achievement. To understand the full power of sexual energy, the philosophy suggests that we must look beyond the physical impulse alone. Desire by itself is powerful, but when it operates without guidance, it can easily become scattered, impulsive, and even destructive. The same force that has the potential to energize creativity and ambition can also lead to confusion, distraction, or reckless decisions if it is left without direction. This is where two other emotional forces enter the picture: love and romance. According to the original philosophy, sexual energy reaches its highest constructive potential only when it is combined with these two influences. Alone, sexual desire is intense but unstable. It burns quickly. It demands immediate expression. But when it becomes connected with love and romance, the nature of that energy changes. Instead of pushing toward short-term satisfaction, the emotional force becomes elevated. It gains depth. It becomes capable of sustaining effort, creativity, and devotion over long periods of time. Love acts as a balancing force. Where raw passion seeks immediate release, love introduces patience. Where impulse pushes toward momentary pleasure, love encourages responsibility and care. Love expands the emotional landscape beyond personal desire and connects it to another human being. This transformation has powerful psychological effects. When a person experiences love, their focus naturally shifts outward. They begin thinking not only about their own desires, but about the well-being, admiration, and happiness of someone else. Their sense of purpose grows larger. This expansion of purpose can guide emotional energy toward constructive action. Instead of being consumed by desire, the individual begins using that emotional intensity as motivation to improve themselves, to achieve, to build something worthy of admiration and respect. Love stabilizes the emotional force of passion. It anchors energy that might otherwise move chaotically. Romance adds another layer to this transformation. Romance is the imaginative expression of love. It brings beauty, symbolism, and emotional richness into relationships. Romance elevates everyday experience into something meaningful and inspiring. It awakens the imagination. When romance is present, people begin seeing possibilities where routine once existed. They write letters, create music, plan experiences, and express ideas with emotional depth. In this sense, romance stimulates creativity. It encourages the mind to imagine, to dream, to design new expressions of connection. When romance combines with love and sexual energy, something remarkable begins to happen. The emotional force that once demanded physical satisfaction becomes transformed into creative power. The individual feels energized but also guided. Passion still exists, but it is no longer uncontrolled. Love directs it. Romance elevates it. Sexual energy fuels it. Together, these three influences create a powerful emotional system capable of inspiring extraordinary effort and achievement. Throughout history, many great works of art, literature, music, and invention have emerged from this combination of emotional forces. Artists inspired by love have produced masterpieces that still move audiences centuries later. Writers have created timeless stories fueled by romantic imagination. Composers have written music that captures the emotional complexity of human relationships. Even in fields far removed from art, the influence of love and romance can be found. Inventors and entrepreneurs often describe moments when the desire to build a better life for someone they loved intensified their determination. Leaders have drawn strength from relationships that inspired them to pursue causes larger than themselves. Love provides meaning to effort. Romance fuels imagination. Sexual energy supplies the emotional intensity that drives action. Together, they create an environment in which creativity and achievement flourish. But the philosophy also offers a warning. When sexual energy operates alone without the stabilizing influence of love and the elevating power of romance, it may easily lead to chaos. Raw passion tends to seek immediate gratification. It may cause individuals to act impulsively, ignoring long-term consequences. Decisions driven solely by uncontrolled desire often lead to regret or wasted potential. History provides many examples of individuals whose lives were disrupted because passion was not balanced by deeper emotional understanding. In those situations, the same powerful energy that could have fueled creativity instead created instability. The difference lies in emotional balance. Love introduces empathy and responsibility. Romance introduces imagination and beauty. Sexual energy introduces intensity and vitality. When these forces operate together, they reinforce one another in constructive ways. Love ensures that passion remains connected to meaningful relationships rather than fleeting impulses. Romance ensures that emotional expression remains creative and inspiring. Sexual energy ensures that the entire system remains vibrant and alive. This balance also contributes to emotional stability. A person who experiences love and romantic connection alongside passion often feels a deeper sense of purpose. Their emotional life becomes integrated rather than fragmented. Instead of chasing momentary experiences, they invest energy into relationships and goals that grow stronger over time. That stability allows the mind to focus more effectively on creative and productive pursuits. Energy that might otherwise be lost in restless desire becomes available for imagination work and achievement. In this sense, the relationship between love, romance, and sexual energy mirrors the broader theme running throughout the philosophy. Human emotions are powerful sources of energy, but their value depends on how they are directed. Uncontrolled emotion may lead to distraction. Guided emotion can produce greatness. When love and romance guide sexual energy, they transform it from a purely physical impulse into a creative force capable of shaping ideas, relationships, and achievements. The result is not the suppression of passion, but its elevation. Instead of diminishing emotional intensity, the individual learns to harness it. Passion becomes purpose. Desire becomes creativity. Emotion becomes inspiration. And when these forces align, the human mind and spirit often reach their most powerful and productive state. In that state, love provides direction, romance awakens imagination, and sexual energy supplies the driving force that carries ideas into reality. Together, they create one of the most powerful combinations in human life, a balance of passion and purpose, capable of inspiring both personal fulfillment and extraordinary achievement. Up to this point, we have been exploring powerful emotional forces: desire, love, ambition, imagination, and the mysterious bursts of inspiration that sometimes appear in the human mind. But all of these ideas eventually lead us toward something even deeper. Beneath the conscious thinking we experience every day lies another layer of the mind, one that works quietly and continuously, whether we are aware of it or not. This is the subconscious mind. If the conscious mind is the part of us that analyzes plans and reasons step by step, the subconscious is something different entirely. It does not argue or judge. It does not pause to question whether an idea is logical or irrational. Instead, it receives impressions constantly and stores them with remarkable precision. Every thought that enters the mind leaves some kind of trace within this deeper layer. Every belief, every fear, every hope, every repeated idea gradually becomes recorded there. In that sense, the subconscious functions almost like a vast recording system. It absorbs the thoughts that pass through the conscious mind, especially the thoughts that carry strong emotional energy. And here is where emotion becomes critically important. The subconscious mind responds most strongly, not to casual thoughts, but to emotionalized thoughts. When an idea is repeated with feeling, when it is backed by desire, faith, love, or even fear, it becomes far more powerful in the subconscious than a neutral thought that passes briefly through awareness. Emotion acts like a signal amplifier. A weak thought may fade quickly, but a thought filled with emotion sinks deeper into the subconscious and remains there longer. Over time, these emotionally charged ideas begin shaping behavior, perception, and decision-making. The subconscious mind does not simply store them, it acts upon them. It begins working constantly day and night to translate dominant thoughts into physical reality. This is one of the most important transitions in understanding how the mind influences achievement. Earlier, we spoke about desire as the starting point of accomplishment. A powerful desire energizes the mind and directs attention toward a goal. But desire alone is not enough if it remains only a temporary wish in the conscious mind. For desire to become achievement, it must move deeper. It must reach the subconscious. Once there, the desire begins influencing the entire mental system. It shapes the way opportunities are noticed. It affects decisions that might otherwise go unnoticed. It influences persistence during difficult moments. The subconscious becomes an active partner in the pursuit of that goal. But the same principle applies to negative thoughts as well. If the mind repeatedly dwells on fear, doubt, or limitation, those emotionalized ideas also become recorded in the subconscious. And once they take root, they begin influencing behavior in subtle ways. A person who constantly repeats thoughts of failure may unknowingly guide their own actions toward outcomes that confirm those beliefs. This does not happen through some mysterious external force. It happens because the subconscious translates dominant thoughts into patterns of behavior, attention, and response. The mind begins acting in harmony with its most powerful emotional impressions. That is why the philosophy emphasizes the importance of emotional control and mental direction. The thoughts that receive emotional intensity become the thoughts that shape reality. Among all emotional influences, some carry especially strong impact on the subconscious. Desire is one of the most powerful. A burning desire for achievement or success can program the subconscious with extraordinary determination. The mind begins searching continuously for ways to fulfill that desire. Faith is another powerful influence. When a person genuinely believes in the possibility of success, that belief strengthens persistence and confidence. The subconscious accepts the idea as a guiding assumption and begins directing actions accordingly. Love carries profound emotional depth as well. Thoughts influenced by love often remain vivid in memory and shape long-term motivation. And as we have discussed throughout this chapter, sexual energy is among the strongest emotional forces of all. When that energy becomes connected to ambition or creative effort, it intensifies the emotional power of those thoughts. The subconscious receives them with unusual strength. And once they are received, the process never truly stops. The subconscious does not rest. It works continuously. While we sleep, it continues organizing impressions and influencing our mental landscape. While we work, it quietly guides intuition, attention, and response. It functions like an unseen engine beneath conscious awareness. Because of this constant activity, the ideas most frequently impressed upon the subconscious eventually become dominant influences in life. They shape habits, they influence attitudes, they guide actions in ways the conscious mind may not always notice. This is why repetition combined with emotion becomes such a powerful force. When a thought is repeated again and again with feeling, it gradually becomes accepted by the subconscious as reality. Once accepted, the mind begins acting in ways that bring that thought closer to physical expression. Opportunities become easier to recognize. Confidence becomes stronger. Persistence increases. The individual begins behaving as though the desired outcome is possible, even inevitable. And that behavior often becomes the difference between ordinary effort and extraordinary achievement. The subconscious mind therefore acts as a bridge between thought and reality. It translates the emotional language of the mind into patterns of action and perception. But it does so without judgment. It does not distinguish between thoughts that help and thoughts that harm. It simply accepts and acts upon the ideas it receives most consistently and most emotionally. That is why understanding this transition from conscious thinking to subconscious influence is so important. It reminds us that thoughts are not harmless passing events. They are signals constantly shaping the deeper levels of the mind. And the thoughts charged with the greatest emotional energy, those driven by desire, faith, love, or sexual force, leave the deepest impressions of all. When these emotional forces are directed toward constructive goals, the subconscious becomes an ally in creation. It begins organizing inner resources toward achievement. But when emotional energy is dominated by fear or doubt, the subconscious may unintentionally reinforce limitation instead. The difference lies in which thoughts become dominant, because the subconscious, once impressed with an idea, works tirelessly to turn that idea into reality. It listens constantly, it records faithfully, and it acts continuously, translating the most powerful thoughts of the mind into the experiences of life. As we move deeper into the understanding of how thoughts influence reality, the philosophy introduces a fascinating metaphor, one that compares the human brain to a broadcasting and receiving station. It is not meant as a strict scientific claim, but as a way of visualizing how ideas and emotions move through the mind and in subtle ways influence the world around us. Imagine for a moment a radio station. Inside that station, signals are constantly being transmitted outward. Invisible waves carry music, voices, and information through the air. At the same time, other receivers' radios tuned to the correct frequency pick up those signals and translate them into sound. The metaphor suggests that the human brain works in a similar way. Every thought we generate carries a certain level of emotional intensity. That intensity can be imagined as the frequency or vibration of the thought. When a thought is weak or casual, its influence is small. It passes through the mind quickly and leaves little impression. But when a thought is charged with strong emotion, its influence increases dramatically. The emotional energy behind the thought amplifies it. It becomes more vivid, more memorable, more powerful. In this state, the thought does two important things at once. First, it is transmitted inward toward the subconscious mind. Second, it is transmitted outward, affecting the way we communicate, behave, and interact with other people. Let's begin with the inward transmission. As we discussed earlier, the subconscious mind records the ideas that carry the strongest emotional intensity. When a thought is repeated with feeling, it leaves a deeper impression. Over time, those emotionally charged ideas become dominant patterns in the subconscious. This is why thoughts backed by strong emotion tend to shape behavior more effectively than neutral thoughts. The subconscious responds to intensity. It reacts to desire, faith, love, fear, enthusiasm, and passion far more strongly than to casual observations. The stronger the emotional charge behind a thought, the more clearly the subconscious receives the signal. Once the signal is received, the subconscious begins translating that idea into action, perception, and decision-making. The individual begins behaving in ways that align with the emotional thoughts that dominate their mind. But the metaphor does not stop there. The brain is also described as a broadcasting station. This means that emotionally charged thoughts do not remain entirely private. They influence the way we speak, the expressions on our faces, the tone of our voice, the confidence in our posture, and the enthusiasm we project when sharing ideas with others. Even if people cannot consciously identify the emotional source, they can feel its presence. For example, imagine listening to two different speakers delivering the same message. One speaks with hesitation, uncertainty, and little emotional investment. The other speaks with enthusiasm, conviction, and belief in the message. The words may be similar, but the emotional signal behind them is completely different. And listeners respond accordingly. They feel the conviction in the voice of the second speaker. They sense the confidence behind the message. The emotional energy behind the words makes the idea feel stronger, more persuasive, more believable. In this way, emotionally intense thoughts are broadcast through human communication. They influence others not only through logic, but through emotional resonance. Now consider how this connects with the earlier discussion about mental stimulation. Certain emotions naturally increase the intensity or vibration of thought. When a person feels strong enthusiasm, love, ambition, or determination, their thoughts become more energetic and focused. The signal becomes stronger. And the stronger the signal, the more effectively it influences both the subconscious mind and the people around them. Among all emotional influences, the philosophy describes one as the most powerful amplifier of thought energy: sex emotion. Sexual energy carries a unique intensity because it combines physical vitality with emotional desire. When that force becomes active, the mind often experiences heightened imagination, increased courage, and stronger determination. In the metaphor of broadcasting and receiving thought, sex emotion acts like a powerful amplifier in the signal chain. It increases the strength of the thought current. Ideas connected with strong sexual emotion become more vivid in the mind. They hold attention longer. They carry more emotional weight. As a result, they are more easily impressed upon the subconscious. And when expressed outwardly, they often appear as enthusiasm, vitality, confidence, and magnetism. This explains why individuals who learn to channel sexual energy into ambition or creativity often develop unusually powerful personalities. Their thoughts carry emotional intensity. Their communication becomes energetic and persuasive. The signal they broadcast is strong. Others feel it. And because emotions spread naturally between people, that energy can influence the thoughts and attitudes of those around them. In leadership, persuasion, and creative expression, this amplified thought energy can become an extraordinary advantage. The individual is no longer communicating only with words. They are communicating with emotional force. Their ideas travel not only through logic, but through enthusiasm, belief, and conviction. Returning to the metaphor, we can imagine the brain constantly transmitting and receiving signals throughout life. Every thought we hold becomes part of that broadcast. Every emotional experience strengthens or weakens the signal. The more emotionally intense the thought, the stronger the transmission. And when certain thoughts are repeated with consistent emotion, they eventually dominate the frequency of the mind. Those dominant signals shape our actions, influence our relationships, and guide the direction of our lives. This metaphor helps illustrate why controlling emotional energy is so important. Because the thoughts we energize become the thoughts that travel deepest into the subconscious and outward into the world. When emotional energy is guided by desire, faith, love, and creative ambition, the broadcast becomes constructive. When dominated by fear, doubt, or uncontrolled impulse, the broadcast becomes chaotic. The power itself remains neutral. What matters is the direction of the signal, and according to the philosophy, the strongest amplifier of that signal, the force capable of increasing the vibration of thought more than any other, is sexual emotion. When guided wisely, it can strengthen the broadcast of creativity, ambition, and purpose. In that way, the mind becomes both a powerful receiver of ideas and a transmitter of influence, shaping not only our inner world, but the world we share with others. After exploring the many forces that shape the human mind, desire, imagination, emotional energy, the subconscious, and the influence of thought, there remains one final concept that the philosophy introduces with a sense of quiet mystery. It is called the sixth sense. Unlike the other mental principles we have discussed, the sixth sense is not described as something that can be switched on instantly or mastered through a simple technique. Instead, it is presented as a faculty that gradually develops after the mind has been disciplined and strengthened through the consistent use of the earlier principles. In simple terms, the sixth sense can be understood as the gateway through which intuitive ideas appear in the mind. These ideas often arrive without warning. They do not emerge through step-by-step reasoning or careful analysis. Instead, they feel like sudden insights, quiet impressions, flashes of understanding, or subtle inner signals that guide a person toward action. Sometimes these signals appear as a hunch about an opportunity that should be pursued. Other times they appear as a warning, an instinctive feeling that something is not quite right and should be reconsidered. In many cases, the individual cannot immediately explain why the impression feels convincing. There may be no logical proof at that moment, yet the intuition carries a sense of quiet certainty. According to the philosophy, these intuitive impressions are the result of the mind operating at a higher level of sensitivity. After the subconscious mind has been repeatedly influenced by clear goals, emotional desire, faith, and focused thought, it begins communicating ideas more freely through the creative imagination. The sixth sense is essentially the channel through which those deeper insights reach conscious awareness. It acts like a bridge between reasoning and inspiration. But the philosophy emphasizes an important point: this faculty cannot be forced. Many people would like to possess immediate intuitive clarity in every decision they face. Yet intuition does not appear simply because we demand it. It develops slowly over time as the mind becomes trained to think constructively and maintain emotional balance. The earlier principles, clear desire, emotional control, disciplined thought, and faith in one's purpose, create the conditions that allow intuition to emerge naturally. When the mind becomes organized and focused in this way, it grows more receptive to subtle impressions that might otherwise be ignored. Experience also plays an important role in this development. As individuals face challenges, solve problems, and reflect on their successes and failures, their subconscious mind gathers enormous amounts of information. Over time, this accumulated knowledge forms a deep internal reference system. When new situations arise, the subconscious compares them with past experiences and sometimes produces an immediate intuitive response. To the conscious mind, the answer appears instantly. But beneath the surface, the subconscious has already processed years of learning and observation. This is why intuition often becomes stronger with age and experience. It is not merely a mysterious ability. It is the result of a mind that has absorbed knowledge, disciplined its thinking, and developed emotional awareness over time. The philosophy therefore presents the sixth sense not as magic, but as the culmination of mental development. It appears gradually when the mind has been trained through desire, persistence, imagination, and emotional control. Once it begins operating, it can provide remarkable guidance. Ideas may appear at the exact moment they are needed. Creative solutions may arrive unexpectedly. A subtle inner voice may suggest caution or opportunity before conscious reasoning has fully analyzed the situation. Those who learn to recognize and respect these impressions often discover that they become valuable allies in decision-making. Still, the philosophy reminds us that intuition should complement reason, not replace it. Logical thinking remains essential for testing ideas and turning inspiration into practical action. The sixth sense simply expands the mind's ability to receive ideas that reasoning alone might not produce. In that sense, it represents the highest stage of mental harmony, where disciplined thought, emotional energy, and creative imagination work together. It is the quiet faculty through which inspiration enters the mind after preparation has been completed. And like any refined ability, it grows stronger only through patience, experience, and the consistent development of the mind's deeper powers. The forces that move us, desire, passion, ambition, are neither good nor bad by themselves. Left unchecked, they can control our choices. But when guided with purpose, they become powerful fuel for creativity, leadership, and achievement. The question is simple, but important. How are you directing your own emotional energy? If these ideas sparked something in you, stay curious. There's much more to explore together, so consider following along and joining us in the next video.